The salvage ship Tyrax's Dawn dropped out of slipspace above Lyrax 9 with minimal power signatures. Its crew of 8 Zarnathi specialists already tense as they approached the most dangerous class of planet known in recorded charts, Class-15 Deathworld. Known across the galaxy as places where even automated probes rarely lasted longer than a few hours, Lyrax 9 was a world of constant chaos. The atmosphere shifted from toxic to lethal within minutes. Radiation storms danced across the skies with unpredictable bursts, and the surface was a jagged mess of unstable rock plates, acid pools, and gravity spikes that bent metal like clay. No species had ever claimed it, and for good reason. It was unlivable. Yet here they were, following a signal that shouldn't exist. It was faint, old, and pulsing in a narrow band that hadn't been used in centuries. Captain Virel, a tall Zarnathi female with a face full of etched command marks, gave the order to hold orbit as the team began triangulating the signal source. It came from a deep ravine near the equatorial mountain belt, shielded by thick cliffs and hidden under atmospheric distortion. Despite heavy interference, they detected a large metallic object, roughly the size of a frigate wedged into the rock. Scans were limited due to the planet's interference, but what they could see was strange. The ship wasn't shattered, only bruised. It had survived somehow. Burn marks and structural scars ran along its hull, but the alloy used wasn't standard Zarnathi, nor any of the known major species. Its angles were too sharp, its design too blunt, like something built to endure, not impress. What truly unsettled the crew was the power reading. Small, weak, but steady. Something inside was still alive. As they descended in a drop shuttle, the world around them groaned and howled with violent winds. Radiation flickered across the sky in waves of green and orange. They landed the shuttle on a rocky shelf overlooking the wreck. From a distance, the ship looked like a beast buried in the land, half sunken, half watching. It had no visible insignia, except one dark emblem near the aft, burnt and hard to read but clearly artificial. The salvage crew moved carefully, their suits reinforced with radiation dampeners and magnetic boots. Drones were deployed to scan ahead, but most returned with scrambled visuals. The closer they got to the wreck, the stronger the static in their comes. Inside the ravine, the temperature fluctuated every few minutes, and the rocks sparked as if alive. Reaching the ship's outer hull, Engineer Solix reached out to touch it and pulled back quickly. "Still warm," he said, his voice shaking. Not from heat, but from realization. No ship could stay warm this long without a live core. Captain Virel gave the command, and they began cutting into the hull using plasma tools. But midway through, the ship responded. A low vibration passed through the metal, almost like a growl, and a section of the hull near them hissed open by itself. No alarms, no lights, just a hatch silently inviting them in. The team hesitated, then entered. Inside, the walls were dark and thick, covered in strange paneling and material that didn't reflect light the way it should. The floor was steady, gravity normal. Oxygen levels were shockingly breathable, as if the ship had kept its environment running. They found corridors that stretched with eerie symmetry, some damaged, others completely intact. Signs of fire and impact were everywhere, but repair foam, unlike any seen before, had sealed most breaches. In one chamber, they passed a set of chairs bolted into the wall, each still holding harnesses intact, as if a crew had left them moments ago. But no bodies, no remains, just silence and the ever-present hum of a still-active generator. Deeper into the ship, they found a control room with cracked screens and a half-functioning interface. Virel ordered a data probe to be installed, hoping to extract logs, but the system responded with a sound, a sharp pulse, like a heartbeat thumping once. A flicker of light passed across the ceiling, and a small eye-shaped sensor swiveled toward them. "It's watching us," whispered one of the crew, and no one argued. They weren't alone. Whatever this ship had been through, however long it had rested on this violent planet, it had not died. And more than that, something about it felt wrong, not in a threatening way, but in a deep, instinctual way. Like it didn't belong. Not here. Not anywhere. Varel ordered the team to retreat until they could analyze the data more safely. But before they could leave, the control room lights flared for a second, and a strange recording began to play. A voice, old and distorted, speaking a language not recognized by the ship's translator. But one word came through clearly, echoed twice, then cut off. Terran? Terran. The crew exchanged glances. That word hadn't been heard in official records for over 2 centuries. A forgotten name tied to old war myths. Humanity? A species declared extinct after the Council's purge generations ago. A race, said to have vanished after rejecting alliance with any galactic order. But if this ship was truly theirs, then they hadn't died. They had endured. The team stood in frozen silence, listening to the echo fade, and Captain Varel slowly turned toward the shadows behind them. She had a growing feeling in her chest, a cold truth crawling into her bones. This wasn't a wreck. It was a survivor. And it had been waiting. The deeper the salvage crew moved into the silent Terran vessel, the stranger the experience became. Gravity inside remained perfectly stable despite their scans confirming the ship's main power core was completely offline, and their own systems began to act strangely. Navigation tools flickered, wristcoms delayed commands, and even the advanced radiation sensors gave mixed readings. Engineer Solix's visor kept fogging despite regulated airflow, and 2 of the drones deployed earlier returned with corrupted video feeds that showed glimpses of corridors that didn't exist on the maps. Inside the ship, the temperature was steady, but the walls were marked with deep scars, blackened lines, and impacts that looked like they came from ancient weapons. Not from age or natural damage, but someone or something had repaired them, with strange, self-hardening metal that pulsed faintly under light. Every sealed compartment they passed had no labels, just reinforced locking mechanisms that resisted even high-frequency scanners. There were no bodies, no signs of life, but everything about the ship felt incomplete, like it had been paused, not abandoned. In the control center, the main console showed damage from both fire and stress fractures, but one central panel still flickered. The AI linked to the panel responded to their presence, but not their commands. It simply repeated a strange humming tone, refusing all translation attempts. Captain Varel ordered the tech unit to bypass the interface and access the ship's memory core directly. After some delay, they managed to pull fragments of internal logs, pieces of text, symbols, and timestamps. But when a screen decoded the name buried in one log entry, the entire crew froze. It read, Terran Deep Recon Unit 7. The words had, wait, ancient wait. Terran meant human. A race no one had seen for centuries. Supposedly extinct after resisting the Council's expansion. Destroyed, forgotten, or maybe just hidden. The log entries were damaged, but the dates matched a timeline over 300 years old. This ship wasn't just a lost wreck. It had survived on a Deathworld for over 3 centuries without support. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Solix whispered that they needed to leave now, before anything else reacted. But Captain Varel remained firm. If this was a human vessel, if it really was part of some deep recon mission, then it was one of the most valuable finds in galactic history. She ordered the scan to continue, telling the crew they were safe, as long as the ship remained passive. Just then, the ship's lights dimmed for a second. A soft vibration passed through the floor, and without any warning, A panel in the rear wall hissed open, revealing a narrow hallway they had not seen before. Everyone turned. Weapons were drawn, though none truly believed they'd help. A cold air flowed from the new passage. A blue light blinked steadily within it, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Captain Virel gave a silent nod, and 2 scouts moved forward, their boots echoing too loudly in the quiet. At the end of the hallway was a sealed door with strange markings human in origin, but aged and scratched beyond reading. The engineers activated a scan on the lock, and before the scan even finished, the door began to open on its own. A blast of colder air hit them, and inside they saw a tall, sealed chamber bathed in dull red light. At the center, something stood. A humanoid figure, clad in heavy armor covered in dust and dents, was secured upright in a vertical pod, its face hidden behind a cracked visor. Its arms folded tightly to its sides, wires running into the suit from the walls like veins. The display above the pod read something unreadable, followed by the symbol for cryoactive. No alarms. No AI warnings. Just the slow sound of machines beginning to hum back to life. The figure didn't move at first, but then one of the scanners blinked and displayed a signal. Heartbeat detected. Alive. Still alive, after centuries. The moment stretched. Before anyone could speak, the cryopod hissed, the front glass lifted, and the armored figure stepped forward, slowly, but with balanced eyes still hidden, movements careful, precise. The crew instinctively stepped back. The figure looked at them in silence, and after a few moments, a voice came through a speaker in the armor, raspy, quiet but human. How long? It asked. No one answered. The voice repeated the question. How long since Unit 7 went dark? Solix tried to respond, but the translator garbled the words. The figure slowly reached toward a console on the wall, pressed one button, and suddenly the ship's AI came alive, displaying images across. The chamber star maps, dates, shifting fleet signatures. Most were outdated. Some had unknown emblems. One final image stood out, a red warning that read, Protocol ended. Isolation breach. The human turned toward them again and whispered, I wasn't meant to be found. Then the ship pulsed again, and somewhere deeper in the vessel, another chamber began to wake. The figure stepped fully out of the cryopod now, his damaged armor clicking softly with each move, the surface scuffed from battle and age, but still functional, and a faint blue glow pulsing from the seams in his chest plate and back. He stood tall, silent, scanning the faces of the stunned Zarathi crew, who dared not speak, unsure if they were witnessing a ghost or some kind of walking relic. His cracked visor hid his eyes, but the tilt of his head showed awareness, intelligence, focus. Then, without warning, the ship's AI finally activated a translator overlay across the chamber wall, displaying the man's biosignature and name, Elias Ward, rank, Commander, Terran Deep Recon, status, active. The crew stared at the screen in disbelief. This human wasn't a body in stasis. He was alive, truly alive. The AI continued translating. Vitals aloud, stating that Commander Ward had been in rotating cryo for over 300 years, only waking when external threats reached high-risk levels. That meant he had endured radiation surges, biological mutations, seismic ruptures, and unknown predator incursions without ever leaving the ship. Just him and the AI. The room remained quiet until one brave technician asked, How did you survive this long alone? The human slowly turned toward the speaker, pausing before responding in a voice dry and deep from long silence. We adapt. It's what humans do. The answer was simple, but it hit the crew harder than a weapon. The stories about humans, if they had ever been true, told of a species too stubborn to die, too clever to be cornered, and now here stood living proof. Ward moved to a side console, wiped away dust with his armored hand, and tapped a few commands. A soft hum passed through the ship again, this time deeper, stronger, like something far beneath the floor had just awakened. The AI flashed a red line across the wall and began a countdown from 300 seconds. When asked what it meant, Ward replied flatly, "It means the ground under your feet is about to change." The captain stepped forward and demanded answers. Who he was, what his mission had been, what was this place? Ward finally looked up. This was a test bed, he explained, one of many. We were sent to worlds no one could tame, to observe, to survive, to hide what needed hiding. He told them Earth had once launched a secret initiative project, Emberfall, where hand-picked recon units were dropped on Death-class planets, not just to test endurance, but to plant Terran infrastructure. Power cores, beacon systems, and defense modules buried so deep that even full planetary scans would miss them. But Lyrax 9 had been different. The extraction shuttle failed. Communications blacked out. The rest of the unit died in the first decade. And still Ward stayed. The Zarlathi stared at him like he was a monument, not just for surviving, but for enduring with purpose. Captain Varel asked, almost gently, "Why didn't you shut it down or leave a signal?" Ward turned slowly. "I was ordered to remain, silent unless the outer signal was tripped. You tripped it. That means something up there remembers us now or wants to erase us again." The countdown ticked lower. The AI's tone changed, now calm but firm. Subsurface gate unlocking in T-minus 60 seconds. Core awakening initiated. The crew scrambled to back away, but Ward raised a hand. "Don't run," he said. "You're already standing on it." Lights beneath the metal floor began to glow through thin cracks-old Terran tech hidden under layers of camouflage, impossible to detect from orbit. Massive machines buried under centuries of rock began to stir. The ship was never just a vessel. It was the key to a gate buried beneath the planet. A cache of something powerful, ancient, and still operational. The crew stared at him, some with awe, others with fear. Elias Ward stood unmoving, his cracked visor catching the flicker of rising energy. "I wasn't guarding this for myself," he said at last. "I was guarding it from being found too soon." As the AI reached the final countdown, the planet itself trembled slightly, and a massive structure began to rise beyond the ravine-tall spires of black alloy breaking through the rocky surface. No one knew what they were yet, but Elias Ward did, and he didn't blink dot as the countdown reached 0. The ship's AI released a low, constant tone, and the entire floor beneath the salvage crew vibrated like something massive was waking up. Under the crust of the planet, Elias Ward remained calm, even as the walls lit with thin blue lines tracing old Terran circuits, reconnecting after centuries. "It's time," he said, reaching out to the side console and pressing a command. Only he could authorize. The ship acknowledged, and deep beneath the surface of Lyrax 9, a buried Terran cache began to activate. From the surrounding mountains, dust clouds burst into the sky as giant spires of dark alloy slowly emerged, towering defense towers, their exteriors scarred by time, yet functional. They rotated one by one, aligning with invisible sky grids, their tips pulsing with faint energy. These were not weapons of conquest, but machines of protection, automated systems built to defend, analyze, and terraform if needed. The AI began transmitting again, but this time across hidden channels. Old frequencies long thought abandoned were reawakened. In far-off corners of the galaxy, where Terran relics had been buried and forgotten, dormant satellites shifted in. Orbit reoriented toward Lyrax 9. Deep space probes blinked back online. Entire sectors once labeled as dead zones began to respond. Inside the chamber, the The Zarnathi crew stood in stunned silence, watching history unfold. Commander Varel, her voice barely above a whisper, asked Ward what they had triggered. The human turned slowly, his cracked visor reflecting the blue light of reactivated systems, and replied, "This was a test bed, and you just tripped the final protocol." He explained that these planets' deathworlds to most species had been chosen by early Terran command for one reason: to hide, to prepare, and to endure where no one else could survive. Ward had been left behind, not just as a test subject, but as a safeguard. If anyone ever came too close, if anyone uncovered what Terrans had buried, he was to initiate the warning protocol. The AI confirmed that data pulses had already reached multiple Terran caches across other Class-15 worlds. Responses were coming in, not aggressive, not hostile, but awake. The Zarnathi crew, brave and trained, now felt something they rarely experienced: fear not of attack, but of understanding. Humanity had not simply vanished. They had scattered like seeds into the hardest places in the galaxy, not to conquer, but to build hidden strongholds no empire would dare follow. And they had done it in silence. Meanwhile, in the center of the galaxy, the Galactic Council's communications grid erupted with alerts. Dozens of long-dead Terran frequencies suddenly flared back to life. Hidden caches began replying to each other. War satellites repositioned. Panic spread through diplomatic networks. What had been myth was now confirmed. Terrans had not only reached the unreachable planets, they had made them theirs. The realization hit like a storm. All this time, while the galaxy argued, expanded, and assumed humans were extinct, they were preparing in silence, hidden in worlds no one dared touch. Ward stepped forward and looked out of the main viewing port, where the towers now stood tall, humming quietly like guardians returned to duty. "We never wanted war," he said softly. "We just made sure we'd never lose one again." And with those words, the AI sent a final signal into the void one that only other Terran systems would recognize. Across the stars, deep underground, stations, cloaked satellites, and buried ships blinked to life. All of them had waited for this single phrase. Now they listened. The galaxy had rediscovered humans. But it was already too late to pretend they were gone. The moment the final beacon from Lyrax 9 pulsed across deep space, the reaction was quiet, but undeniable signals, soft and ancient, began to answer from every corner of the galaxy. Not messages of war, not alarms, not demands, just one repeated phrase translated across hundreds of languages. Status: awake. One by one, other hidden Terran caches, long forgotten beneath scorched crusts and acidic storms, beneath polar ice and molten. Cores lit up from slumber. In sectors marked uninhabitable, regions declared silent or cursed, instruments once left idle began to stir auto-defenses realigning, power sources humming gently, command systems verifying ancient codes. Ward, now aboard the Zarnathi vessel, stood silently near the observation window, watching the towers of Lyrax 9 below finish, locking into a perfect grid around the planet. The orbiting satellites blinked blue in sequence, forming an invisible barrier no ship could cross without permission. Captain Varel approached him cautiously, unsure whether to feel relief or dread. She asked him if this was it, if war would come next. Elias Ward didn't answer at first. He just looked down at the storm-racked surface of the world he had guarded for centuries, then said calmly, "Not unless someone's foolish enough to step where they were never invited." He told her that he would leave Lyrax 9 now that the final protocol had been confirmed. But the planet was not abandoned. It had never been. It was simply quiet by design, not by accident. "Some places stay silent," he added, "because noise would wake what shouldn't be disturbed." Varel nodded, sensing that this was less a warning and more a truth, carved out of human endurance. As Ward walked aboard the transport, the AI in his ship sent one last encrypted ping to nearby Terran systems. And far beyond, buried deep inside forgotten parts of space, entire fleets responded. Ships hidden behind dead moons, cloaked among asteroid belts, or frozen beneath the ice of black stars, began to warm their cores, test their engines, and wait. These were the deep sleep fleets crewed by 1 or 2 Guardians each, trained to remain inactive for centuries, awaiting only one signal. And now they had received it. Panic stirred across the larger empires. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, trying to decide whether to speak, investigate, or retaliate. But no one made the first move, because there was no enemy. To point at only shadows, only silence. The Terrans had not attacked. They had not threatened. They had simply proven they were never gone. No empire had ever noticed, because no empire had dared enter the places humanity had chosen. Class-15 worlds marked by violent storms, tectonic fury, and life-erasing radiation worlds too harsh for science, too expensive to study, too far to cling. But for humanity, these places had been perfect. While the stars moved on, humans dug deep, adapted, disappeared. Not because they were weak, but because they were preparing, waiting, and when finally remembered, they did not roar, they whispered. The salvage crew returned to their sector with Ward, but none dared speak of what they saw in public channels. The report was buried, classified, sealed with markings that even the Zarnathi government couldn't unlock. And yet rumors spread like heat through vacuum. The phrase passed between officers and traders, from black market whispers to high command fears. Deathworlds were never empty. Humanity was already there. On mining colonies and transport routes, people looked to the stars a little longer, wondering which dark planet might blink awake next. Which one might have another Elias Ward, another vault, another silent promise. Because now the galaxy knew that those impossible planets, once ignored, had never been lost. They had been guarded. Humanity had never been destroyed. They had only stepped out of sight. And now the stars understood. They were watching, waiting, enduring.